Hey everybody, and welcome to Starbucks, a Corban Doctorate of Ministry edition. I'm Jordan,
My name's Chris.
and we are two DMin students who thought maybe we should make a video giving you a basic orientation to Corban University and the Doctorate of Ministry Program. And so just a little bit about each of us. My name is Jordan Newton. I am a teacher at Corban. I've been a teacher at Corban for 9 years. And I'm finishing my Doctorate of Ministry almost right now, actually. I started in 2016. I did my project in the third and the fourth year a little bit early, and I wrote my project in the end of the fourth year, and I presented it just back in February. As we make this video, it is February 28th, so I guess I presented it 3 weeks ago. And I'm going through revisions, and I'm turning it in, and we're soon to be done. I also am a pastor. I pastored for about a decade doing house church ministry, and I'm looking at changing life drastically and going overseas with my family. But I occasionally do grading for Dr. Gertson on thesis projects. I occasionally advise students, and it just so happens that Chris and I live in the same city, Salem, Oregon, and we kind of bumped into each other and started talking about this Doctorate of Ministry. So I'll let Chris introduce himself.
My name's Chris Meade. I am one of the pastors at Morning Star Community Church here in Salem, and I've spent about the last 15 years in ministry, pastoring small churches, turnaround churches, and after one turnaround church, ended up back here in Salem at my hometown and coming on staff at my home church. And am addicted to coffee, and so met my friend here at Starbucks as I was feeding that addiction, and we started talking about the DMin program over at Corban. And I am now on the opposite end of starting my DMin, and I am now the first year student going through the first semester trying to navigate my way as I launch into this new adventure of pursuing my Doctorate of Ministry in Strategic Leadership. Super excited for it. I have no idea what I'm going to do, and I don't know if I really am sure what I got myself into, but that's why I got him here. So he's going to navigate us through what this thing is and how to navigate even the first semester in the first year and expectations for the future.
Yeah, funny story. In the fall and summer of 2019, I was at this Starbucks writing my thesis project. One of my disciplines was to get out of the house, away from my 3 kids, and get in here and do pages, 4 or 5 at a time. Honestly, I averaged 1 Starbucks drink for every 4 pages. And so my 400-page paper, it turned out to be a pretty expensive thing. But that's just the lay of the land to get it done. But anyway, I was here typing my papers. Chris and I got talking, and he was kind of looking around for something, and so he got into the program, and then we just had a conversation. It was maybe a month ago, and I was giving him some general advice, in general, like, this is what the program is like, and we thought, wow, not everybody lives in Salem. We should share this with everybody. So that's why you're here, and that's why we intentionally chose a loud Starbucks. Some of you are not going to like that decision, but this is where those conversations happened, so we're recreating them a bit for you. So Chris, go ahead. What are some questions?
Well, I'll tell you, here is what I found as a first year student, is that it started in January. I opened up the program, I opened up my syllabus, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so all of a sudden I went through this process of self-discovery and seeking out advice and help of, okay, how does this program even work? What's the layout of the land? What's this next year going to provide? In fact, not just the next year, but the program as a whole. I thought I knew, but there's a lot of details that I didn't know. So how does this program work?
It's entirely normal to be in your first semester and to get the syllabus, and for the first time in your academic career, to read that several times. Because when you went to college, or maybe in your master's program, you were in class and you thought, they'll tell me if it's important, they'll give us the books, I'll buy the books. But in the Doctorate of Ministry, it's actually really, really important that you read over everything and you get on to Converge and start figuring out your life and getting it mapped out. So basically, as an overview of kind of the year in the doctoral program, there's the first part of the year, which is basically January to June. And to simplify it, you're basically doing a lot of reading. Probably you've seen at least one of the syllabi. The second one dropped pretty recently. There's a lot of reading. And that's basically what you're doing. There are some small papers. I would consider them small. But you're working through one module at a time. And so if you're doing things correctly, you've got 2 months to kind of do that first module. Then the second one drops. You do that second one, and right before summer, you get the thesis project stuff. And my experience has been is that last one is the one that's a bit jarring. Not because it's the most difficult, but because it's so different than the other 2 modules that you just got used to. But I'll tell you this, when we finally get to that middle thing, which is summer, those 2 weeks where you're on campus together, a lot of people show up and they're not quite done. They are behind. There's been issues. You'll have some people who joined the program in April and are scrambling. We'll have international people who are flying in, trying to get resources that they couldn't get overseas. So there is some general program flexibility that you should be aware of, that there is some flexibility with things. But I mean, Dr. Leroy Gertson, or Dr. G as we often call him, Dr. G will tell you, don't plan to turn in stuff late. Get organized and get it done. But to just overview again, reading in small assignments, 2 weeks where we're all on campus together. And then after that time from June on, the idea is that you write some very large papers, and then if you do everything right and life doesn't fall apart, there's no major calamities in ministry, work, or family, you can finish up between Halloween and Thanksgiving. I think I did that 2 out of 3 years, which meant that Christmas season was off, which was a nice time to either get ahead on reading, or it was a nice time to just go, what's my family up to? Let's take a trip, kind of a thing.
One of the other things that I found myself struggling with as I was looking at the syllabus for the first time, and then now going into the second section for the next class, is the reading load. I went from reading 1 to 4 books a year to now looking at reading what looks like 20 to 30. It's intense, it seems overwhelming, and so part of my question as a highly driven person, but also as a guy in full-time ministry with a family, a wife and 3 kids, and wanting to have some kind of social life, how can someone enter into this and know how to be successful? And even like the work-life balance with being in a DMin program. And this program is set up for people who are in full-time ministry or working full-time, so there's some flexibility, but there's still a good amount of coursework. So how would you say that a student coming in can be successful?
It's a good question. Well, I think I have 3 different kinds of advice, because I have advice for the beginning of the year where it's reading heavy. And in that period of time, you'll hear some people suggest different speed reading or skimming strategies, and I'm going to choose to not address those. I think the best thing to do is to look at your life and go, where can I find margin that maybe I'm not using it? My big strategy, I'm a morning person, some of you are going to hate that about me, but what I did is I figured out that if I got up an hour to an hour and 15 minutes earlier, and you will have the soul wrestle about, do I cut out devotions to do doctorate work because it's the same thing? I'll let you deal with that. I don't want to be preachy. But I got about an hour, 15, hour and a half time in the mornings before my kids got up and before anyone needed me. And that's where I did all of my reading. And I did that 4 days a week. Sometimes I would do that on a Saturday, although later after I slept in. But basically, you can find 7 hours of reading there. Everyone reads at different paces. But I did most of my most of my whole entire program before my family woke up. That was my basic strategy. I have other friends. I know, shout out to Eugene Edwards, who's in the program. He's a year 2 guy. I was just meeting with him the other day, and Eugene Edwards basically waits for his family to go to bed. And he does his project, from 10 to 11:30 every night, when they're asleep. So I think the best thing to do is to find a rhythm. My strongest advice with reading is find a rhythm where you can make time that's repeatable, and once it becomes a habit, habit books, #habit books, they'll tell you don't even think about it anymore. You just get up because that's the time you get up, the coffee's going, and you're reading. And over time, you kind of get those things taken care of. So that's my reading advice. The 2 weeks that you're on campus, my advice to you, especially to people who are local to Oregon, is to be there. Meaning some people are flying in from other parts of the world, some from other parts of the country, and they're staying on campus. really plan ahead that you should not be busy. If you're a pastor, make sure that you've thought ahead about who's doing the preaching, who's leading, so that you don't need to take phone calls as best as you can. This is a kind of retreat if you've been in ministry, to have 2 weeks with peers who totally get your life, where we're talking about these enriching topics. And I noticed that a few students showed up and they brought work with them, and that was a big mistake. Either needing to get home over a weekend to preach a message, or fires to put out, or just it seemed like everybody at their church called them. There's no judgment on that, but if I could give advice for those 2 weeks, it's do your best to be there. And for the post-residency, where you're writing major papers, my advice would be whatever rhythms you did for reading, do the same thing for writing. You start figuring out what the big paper is and making it into manageable pieces, and then instead of reading 50 pages a morning, you're writing 2.5 pages a morning. That doesn't work for everybody, but that was my strategy.
I definitely think I'll take after Eugene Edwards. Then I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
But so another thing that I struggled with as a new student, I mean, I've gone through a THM and I've gone through my bachelor's. What was interesting is this is a whole different program. And so getting a doctorate, there's a lot of ideas of what that means and the work that's going to take, but what expectations of this? I think I even started this program not truly knowing what I was getting myself into. So what would you say are some healthy expectations that a first-year student, brand new, can have, that they can look forward to, not just for the first year, but ongoing?
There is no way to get rid of all of the ambiguity in a Doctorate of Ministry program, because you all have different projects, ideas, contexts. Some of you might think this is going to be all pastors, but that's actually not the case. You're going to have people from education. You're going to have people in the business sector who are maybe theologically strong, who wanted to integrate. You're going to find people in nonprofits, men and women. You're going to find people at different ages. And so it's a very diverse group, which is one of my favorite things about it. And so for expectations, there's a lot of ambiguity, which means there is a syllabus. You read these books, you do these papers, but the papers are by nature really broad, and so are the assignments, because for them to be applicable across contexts, there has to be a lot of wiggle room. And a sad reality is that a lot of people have struggles throughout the year, maybe struggles related to their ministry, to their family, to their personal health. And so it's not uncommon for students to really struggle to get assignments done. Dr. G is usually pretty compassionate. You don't get out of the work, but he'll take it late occasionally when you're communicating with him. But there is some ambiguity, because we're all not doing the exact same things. And so from the expectation standpoint, you have to have a pretty good tolerance of that. Also, Dr. G loves to grade things very meticulously, which sometimes means you don't get things back instantly. And you just have to kind of know that there's nothing wrong, there's no problem, no fires behind closed doors. It just, on the larger things especially, where he's very detailed and wants to actually give you real feedback, just depending on when you turn things in and the ordering, you could end up waiting more than a month for assignment feedback. That happens. But once that's your expectation, you kind of know I turn things in and I'm not waiting, I'm moving on to the next thing.
That's good. What was interesting to me is to see and discover what the cohort was. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I wasn't sure who I was entering in with, and are we with the whole group? Are we with everybody that's together, or are we with just people who are entering in with us in the year that we start?
Yeah, that's great. So you're in class with anybody who's in that 3-year cycle. So Chris is going to be a first-year student. My friend Eugene, who I mentioned, is a second-year student. And one of our international students who I'm quite fond of, Sunny, who's from India, Sunny Abraham, he would be a third-year student. And so they're part of a group, let's say, that have been together. But in the classroom, you're all mixed in, and it actually takes you a couple of days to figure out who's who and how do people know each other. And it's kind of fun. I believe most of the years have had somewhere between 8 and 14, I am guessing, people. So you end up being a room of about 30 to 35. And some people are on the trail end, and they're They're finishing up year 3, and others of you are in the beginning going, what's happening? And most people show up to campus, especially the year 1s, a bit frazzled, and you learn really quickly that everything's going to be fine. It's chill. It's just not what you're used to, because most of us in undergrad and maybe the master's level probably did residency and stayed on campus and had weekly classes. And this is much more like, here's a lot of reading and small assignments, get it done and show up in June. And I was telling Chris, there's plenty of type A students who are very detailed, meticulous, got everything done and turned in. And there are other people who maybe just because of circumstance or personality, really struggling to get things done. That happens. A doctorate of ministry is not a PhD where you're doing original research on some, I'm sorry to say, but obscure topic, with the academic elite. These are all people who care very much about their ministry, their work, or their nonprofits. And so we're all working with people trying to take things from the world of research and theology and integrate it to people's lives. And so we understand there's a lot going on for everybody.
I think also part of the struggle of a new student, of a first-year student, is that we don't know what we don't know. So if you were to give advice to a first-year student going into their first semester, what would be those things, that general advice that you would give them other than the topics that we already covered?
I'll reiterate one, because my biggest advice is develop your rhythms for studying, for getting out of the house if you need to, or the up late, the morning, or that every Saturday, whatever you need to do, develop those rhythms with reading, reapply them with writing, and you'll find that as you get to the thesis project after your third year, if you're keeping those rhythms going, you're going to move through and you're just going to keep going, and there won't be a delay. So rhythms would be important. When it comes to reading, something that I have done is I very quickly decide if this is a book I like and I'm going to use or learn from, or if it has thesis or life connectivity. I decide really quickly, and the first thing I do is I take the book and I start a new piece of paper, and I try to get the book down onto one piece of paper, and I put it in the front and shut it. So if we have to do book reviews for that class, which I believe Macintosh usually has you do, or perhaps it was Dr. G, you have your book review that you just kind of hand wrote that you can type into a full paper. But basically 2 years later, when you remember what was a book on leadership, and you grab it out and you take that first, and the book is reduced to one page. And that was actually really helpful when I came to thesis writing, and I was trying to look through things on my topic, and I had 12 or 14 books with my topic that then became 12 to 14 individual sheets of paper that summarized everything I'd been reading. That was really useful for me.
I wish you would have told me that at the beginning of the semester.
It ends up not being that hard to do if the book is within recent memory, but this is the best when it's been a long time.
Yes.
So that would be one advice. Let me see. So I would also suggest, as best as you can, nobody knows what they're going to do in the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen in their life and ministry. And even though some people think they know what they're going to do for their thesis project, nobody really does. But it's important to be okay with that ambiguity. And what you need to do is make some guesses. My first year, I guessed that I was going to do something with house church ministry, and so I did all my work in year 1 and into year 2 about that, and guess what? My wife and I had to resign. So in year 2 and 3, at the end of 2 and into 3, I switched entire different realm of topics. And so that might happen to you too. You have to be comfortable with that, but every year you should probably pick a direction and go that way with your thesis work. And so that means, as best you can, with the suggested reading, not the required on the syllabus, but the suggested, take a couple of books that are related to the thing you're focusing on. Is it leadership development? Is it spiritual formation? Is it assessment on some level? Is it relational intelligence? If you have an idea for your thesis project, try and figure out what books you can take off suggested reading so that you can start chipping away at it and getting it more clear. In the same way, in the post-residency, after summer where we're writing the big papers, in that time period, I would look at whatever the project is that you need to do and figure out how can you tie in your idea about your thesis so that you can be doing little bits of research or writing on that topic specifically. And usually there's a lot of guidelines on those final papers, but you might find a wiggle room of 5 or 6 pages in one section where you could kind of tangent off onto your topic and come back. And why that's really important is after 2 or 3 years of tangenting, you have big chunks that are useful for you to establish moving into actually working on your thesis. I think I'm kind of unusual this way, but I did a lot of extra work in year 2 and 3 on some of these extra pieces, and they ended up being about 80 or 90 usable pages in my thesis. That's pretty unusual, but I was writing on something, and I took too big of an idea basically, and I took the time to write about it. And in year 4, when I'm working on my thesis, I realized I've already addressed this somewhere, and while I can't just copy and paste it, I have to modify a lot of it. It's just a lot of usable chunks. I think that's probably what I would say for general advice, Chris.
Yeah. It's a lot. It's good.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Well, anyway, we live local, and so we wanted to share kind of some of our conversations with you. Hopefully this was useful to you. I'm also going to do a technology video probably after this and post it at the same time, because you were saying that technology was a big problem.
That was my next question about how to navigate Converge. What is Converge, and where do I go? And so check out that video after this and see how you can navigate through the Converge, because that will be helpful to your success in starting this program.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Jordan. You probably will see me this semester when you arrive for summer. I intend to be there, but my family is looking at going international, so time frames are fuzzy. But hopefully we'll see each other this summer.
And I will see you this summer, definitely. And I'm going to go back to reading. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming to you live from Starbucks in Salem, guys. Welcome to Corban's Doctorate of Ministry Program. Hopefully you're enjoying the start of it. Hopefully the anxiety is low.
Yeah.
And hopefully you know that you can reach out to other people, to Dr. G, or even to Chris or Jordan Newton, Newton at Corban.edu.
Definitely.
A lot of the people who are in the program ahead of you love to help. We're just not usually asked. So if you have questions, if it's causing anxiety, I bet it could be fixed with an email, a text message, or something of the like. But anyway, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you guys in June. God bless.
God bless.